was.
Welcome back. Tonight we're looking at something that I find quietly disturbing, glitches in the Matrix. Those moments when reality seems to correct itself, badly, like it got caught. The 3 accounts we have tonight left the people involved genuinely unsure of what they could trust, including themselves. The man entering my apartment building had my face, but I was still 40 feet away on the sidewalk, watching him do it. I stopped walking. He did not stop. He pressed the fob against the reader, heard the click I have heard every day for 3 years, and pulled the door exactly the way I pull it, left shoulder dropping slightly, right hand low on the handle. I know that detail because my girlfriend pointed it out once. She said it looked like I was trying to break in every time I came home. I stood on the pavement until the door swung shut behind him. Then I stood there a little longer. The thing I need you to understand is that I did not feel terror. I felt the specific flatness that comes before terror when your brain is still deciding what category to put something in. I pulled out my phone. I called my girlfriend. She picked up on the second ring and told me she was watching television. I asked her if anyone had come into the apartment in the last 2 minutes. She said no. I told her to lock the deadbolt and not open it until she heard my voice in the hallway. She asked me what was wrong. I said I wasn't sure yet. I went inside. The lobby was empty. The elevator was on the 6th floor, which is my floor. I watched the number on the display above the doors. It did not move for 3 full minutes. Then it moved to 5, then 4. I took the stairs. My girlfriend was standing in the open doorway when I reached the landing. I had told her not to open the door. She said I'd knocked. She said I had used our specific knock, which is not a pattern I have told anyone, because we made it up the week we moved in and never mentioned it to another person. I had not knocked. I had not been on this floor yet. We checked every room, the closets, under the bed, the bathroom with the lock that sticks, which was locked from the inside, which requires a key we keep on a hook by the front door. That key was still on the hook. We stood in the hallway and looked at each other, and I did not know what to say because there was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like I was coming apart. We decided to leave. That felt like the only rational option. We packed a bag in 4 minutes, and I went to get my keys from the bowl by the door. There were 2 sets. My key ring, and another key ring identical, down to the small chip on the corner of the supermarket loyalty card I have been meaning to replace for 2 years. Same chip, same position, same worn patch on the leather fob where my thumb sits when I drive. I left both sets in the bowl. I do not know why. It seemed important not to touch the second set, the way you don't move something at a scene before you understand what the scene is. We stayed at her sister's place for 6 days. On the 7th day, I went back to collect more clothes. I went alone. I told myself it was because I didn't want to scare her further. That wasn't the real reason. The real reason was that I needed to know if the second set of keys was still there, or if it had moved. I don't want to tell you what I found in that bowl, not because it frightens me to describe it, because the description would tell you something I'm still not ready to say out loud, which is that whatever came into the building that evening has been inside longer than I have, and knows the apartment better than I do, and is still learning my life from the inside while I try to understand it from outside. That next story moves from something that got inside someone's head to something that followed a person home. The man was standing at the bottom of my basement stairs, and I had been alone in the house for 6 days. I did not scream. I stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at him the way you look at something your brain refuses to process, just the raw visual data, nothing attached to it yet. He was wearing a gray work jacket, dark trousers, boots with thick rubber soles. His back was to me. He was facing the wall. I counted to 3 and he had not moved at all. Not a shoulder rise. Nothing. The air at the top of the stairs was colder than the kitchen by enough that I noticed it. Wrong for the season, wrong for the time of day. And there was a smell coming up from below, faint but specific. Damp wool and something underneath it, like machine oil that had soaked into fabric over years. My own boiler should have been humming. It was not. The basement was completely unusually silent. I stepped back into the kitchen, picked up my phone from the counter, and dialed. No signal. This is a city apartment. I have never once lost signal in that kitchen. I moved to the window. 4 bars. I dialed again. The call dropped the moment it connected. I looked back through the doorway. He was still there. Same position, same stillness. And what I noticed then was that his shadow was wrong. The overhead bulb at the top of the stairs was behind him and to the left. His shadow should have stretched forward and right across the floor. It went straight up the wall instead, directly above him, like something had rotated the light source 90 degrees without touching the bulb. I went for the front door. Deadbolt thrown, chain on. I had not put the chain on. I live alone and I never use the chain because I forget, and then I cannot get back in easily, so it sits unhooked. It was hooked. I got the chain off. I got the deadbolt open. I pulled the door and it opened 4 inches and stopped. There was resistance, not mechanical, just weight and pressure, like someone on the other side was leaning against it with their full body and not pushing, just holding. I pulled harder. The door gave 2 more inches and then something shifted and it snapped back hard enough to slam my palm into the frame. I went to the back door. Open. No resistance at all. I stepped out into the alley and I did not look back into the house. And I want to be precise about that, because whatever had been pressing against the front door made no appearance at the back, and that absence bothered me more than if it had followed me through. It suggested intention, selection. I walked to the end of the alley, turned onto the street, and sat down on the curb under a light. I called a friend. The call connected on the first try. She came and I stayed with her that night, and for a long time after I dropped onto her sofa, I could not stop thinking about the smell of that jacket and whether it had moved. The next afternoon, I went back in the daylight with her waiting outside. The basement was empty. The front door chain was unhooked the way I always leave it. Nothing was out of place. I told myself it had been exhaustion or a carbon monoxide leak, and I called the gas company and they found nothing. I removed the chain entirely and replaced it with a bolt that only operates from inside, which addressed nothing that had actually happened. And I knew that, but I needed to do something with my hands. I did not go into the basement for 11 days. On the 12th day, I needed to get to the fuse box. I went down the stairs and checked the fuses, and they were fine, and I turned to come back up. There was a mark on the wall at the bottom of the stairs, a scuff in the paint, at roughly shoulder height, the kind of mark a jacket might leave if someone stood with their back pressed against the wall for a long time. I had repainted that wall 8 months ago. I would have noticed it before. I found a photo taken 3 months ago near the floor, water damage, unrelated, and the wall above it in the background is clean. I have not found an explanation for the mark. It is slightly larger this week than when I first measured it. The smell is still there sometimes. And this final account comes from someone who wasn't being followed by anything outside, but rather by something inside a building that should not have existed. Buildings don't change overnight. Layouts don't shift. Staircases don't relocate. And yet, sometimes, a person walks into a space they know well and finds it has quietly disagreed with them. This is that story. The stairwell went down to a floor that my building does not have, and the hallway smelled like my childhood home. I've lived in the same apartment building for 6 years. 4 floors, 16 units, 1 elevator that breaks down roughly every 3 months, and a stairwell at each end of the main corridor. I know this building the way you know somewhere you've walked through half asleep. The exact sound the fire door makes when it swings back on its hinges, the particular draft that moves through the west stairwell in winter. The west stairwell goes from the ground floor to the 4th. Always has. Last February, around 7 a.m., I took the west stairs down because the elevator was out again. I was carrying a laundry bag and moving on autopilot, still tired, not really tracking. I reached what I assumed was the ground floor, pushed through the door, and stopped. The hallway was not the lobby. It was narrower, the ceiling lower. The light yellowed and dim in the way of incandescent bulbs, rather than the LED strips my building installed years ago. Linoleum floor, not commercial tile, and the smell, cedar, old carpet, the specific dish soap my mother used when I was a child, a scent I have not encountered in over 20 years. I had the disorienting sensation of being small in a hallway I was supposed to know. The hallway extended about 30 feet and turned left. No unit numbers, no mailboxes, no call panel. The air was warmer than the stairwell, noticeably so, as though someone had just left. A low electrical hum moved through it from somewhere I couldn't locate. I did not go further in. I stood in the doorway and understood, without being able to say why, that I should not walk toward that left turn. I let the door close and went back up. I did my laundry. I didn't tell anyone. I went back to the west stairwell that evening, expecting the floor to be gone, expecting closure. And the lobby was there. Cold tile, LED lights, mailboxes along the left wall. Normal. I breathed in, and it smelled like concrete and nothing else. I told myself I'd been half asleep, taken a wrong step, imagined the rest. Then I noticed the mailboxes. My building has 16 units. I know this. I have known this for 6 years. There are 16 mailboxes in 2 rows of 8, numbered accordingly. I've walked past them hundreds of times without thinking about them. There were 17. The extra one sat at the far end of the bottom row. Slightly different in finish, slightly darker, the number plate blank. No unit designation, no name tag, just a lock and a slot. Exactly like the others, except that it had no reason to exist, and I had never once noticed it before. I stood there for a long time. I checked the rows twice. 17 boxes. 1 blank. I went upstairs and looked up the building directory. 16 units. I checked the lease agreement I signed 6 years ago. 16 units. I have no explanation for what is in that box or who uses it or how long it has been there. There is one more thing. When I got back to my apartment and hung up my coat, I smelled it immediately. Cedar. Old carpet. That soap. Clinging to the fabric as though I'd walked through that hallway for much longer than a few seconds, as though something had followed the scent home and settled there. I've washed the coat twice since then. The smell comes back within a day. I still take the west stairs. I still pause before I push the door open, hand on the bar, weight shifted back, listening for the hum. But now I also pause at the mailboxes. There are always 17. The blank one is always locked. I've never seen anyone open it. I don't know what's below that lobby. I don't know what's inside that box. I only know the cedar smell is still on my coat this morning. 3 accounts. 3 people who now move through the world with slightly less certainty than before. After everything I've read for this channel, and it's been enough to make me check my own hallways twice, that's the part that stays with me. Stay safe out there. I'll see you next time.